What's going on, everyone? It's Elias here at the Rainy Forge, and this is a Yakut knife. Now, this incredible little knife comes from Siberia. It is a jack-of-all-trades knife that was designed for surviving the wilderness and doing just about anything that you would need to do to survive and thrive in the tundra. Now, I'm going to tell you a little bit about this incredible knife, and you're going to watch me make this incredible little knife. So let's get into it. The Yakut knife. Coming from the people of Siberia, this truly is an amazing multi-use tool. Anywhere from clearing off bark, cutting down brush, whittling kindling, this knife can do just about all of it while retaining an incredibly sharp blade. Now, the blade itself, the single beveled edge, is very similar to Japanese single bevel edged knives. And this could easily have been an intermingling of cultures and ideas thousands of years ago before the two peoples split different directions. So the fuller that you see me hammering into the back of the blade here doesn't actually really serve purpose or was designed for a specific task. Rather, the reason for this fuller is because when knifesmiths were making these knives in Siberia, they were very limited on how much steel they had, and they really wanted to make sure that their blades were long and wide, but they didn't want to sacrifice on spine thickness. So they found that by hammering in a fuller, they would stretch the steel where they needed to, while keeping a good solid thick spine for batoning or hammering on. Now, traditionally, the Yakut knife had a birch bark handle, usually a cool spiraled burl wood of sorts, and same thing for the inside of the scabbard. Now, these knives traditionally were about 7 to 8 inches of blade. However, this knife we're going a little bit shorter as per requested by the customer. Now, these knives are special in that they were absolutely not to be used as weapons. In fact, if you listen to interviews of the Yakutian people who still make and use these knives to this day, they will all tell you the same thing, that these knives are not weapons, strictly tools for survival in the tundra.
So here's our awesome Yakut knife all forged out. Got the fuller on the back and our beautiful single bevel with that striking profile. So all that we're going to do now is just stick it back in the forge and let it anneal for a couple hours to soften up the steel, make it easier to grind, and then we'll get to grinding. So here is our beautiful Yakut knife with our bevel ground in. I have this taken to 60 grit currently, but we're going to be going back to 36 grit once it goes through the tempering process. And the reason for that being, I have left the edge a little bit on the thicker side, about 1/8 of an inch thick, if not a little bit more. And the reason for that is that if you were to grind this bevel down all the way to about a 1/16 or a 32nd of an inch thick on the blade, it will have a very, very strong tendency to want to warp when we heat it up in the forge and quench it in oil. So we're leaving it a little bit thicker to kind of compensate for that fact and try and make it so this knife doesn't warp on us, because we want this back to stay nice and flat and our edge to stay nice and straight. So traditionally with these Yakut knives, they would have a differential heat treatment done. Very similar to how I apply furnace cement on the spine of the blade to do a hamon line, but with the Yakut people, what they would do is they would take a piece of thick wire and heat it up to like a glowing orange and rest it right on the spine of the blade, and that'll draw that temper down and through to the blade. In fact, there's videos of people using these knives to stab through coins and then be able to cut through paper. So these are incredibly durable knives when you're able to temper them properly. And so what we're going to do here at the Rainy Forge is we're going to stick this blade in the forge, heat it up, quench it in oil, and then I'm going to actually give it one tempering process in my tempering oven just to make sure that that blade isn't brittle at all and will chip and break when we go to stab or cut things. Once that's done, instead of taking it through another tempering process in my oven, I'm going to do what is tradition and heat up a piece of rod that I have to a nice dull orange, and then sit that on the spine of the blade, and hopefully we'll draw that temper down and into the blade to make this knife super durable, but will hold an edge very well in addition. So, out to the forge we go. So we got that temper brought down through the blade. The tip ended up getting a little bit too warm, but that's fine because I want that durability with the tip. So having it a little bit softer is alright. I'd rather have the tip bend rather than snap if you try and stab something with it. So as a work knife, this is perfectly fine. So now we're going to go ahead on the 60 grit belt and just clean everything up. And then I'm going to switch over to the 36 grit belt to finish doing this bevel all the way. I haven't decided yet if I'm going to do a full flat grind or do a flat grind down to a Scandi grind. We'll see once I get grinding. And then after that, the next step is going to be to grind in some knife shelves to get this nice and clean down here at the tang. So when I make my handle, it slides in nice and clean. So here is our Yakut knife, all polished up. I have not put an edge on it yet. I've decided I am going to go with the Scandi grind. That's just going to make it easier for me to work with this knife as I put together handle and the scabbard without having to worry about cutting myself or putting a piece of painter's tape on the edge. So the next thing we're going to do is hop over to the handle, and I've got this beautiful block of black locust that I picked up on a job. And we're just going to cut this down the center, and then we're going to mill out both sides so the tang slides in really nice. And then polish the handle up, give it a nice octagonal shape so it feels good in the hand. And then we'll move on and work on the scabbard. So here's the handle, nice and polished up. I'll probably finish this with either a wood polish or linseed oil, just to give the wood some added protection, make it nice and shiny. But before we glue the blade in here, as you can see I've got it loose, before I glue that in here, I went ahead and scribed out on my wood for our little scabbard that we're going to be making here. So I've got two pieces with the inside scribed out, and we're just going to go ahead and chisel that inside out. No reason to go over to the mill this time. This is just poplar, nice and soft, so it'll chisel really easily. And the reason that we're going for poplar instead of something fancy is because we're making a scabbard. So this is actually going to be shaped and then covered with leather, so you're not actually going to see the wood. And so what we use doesn't really matter, and poplar is nice and easy to work with, so that's what we're going to work with here. So like I said, first thing I'm going to do is go ahead and chisel out the inside here, and then we'll glue this together, shape it, and we'll move over to leather. So here is our scabbard block all glued up. I added a piece of black walnut to the top since the top will be visible, and I wanted things to be nice and clean, specifically the slot where the knife goes in. So I was able to use my mill to do that slot there, so it's a little bit prettier. And our knife should fit in there nice. And I've already gone ahead and marked off where my angle is, where I'll be taking material off, so we can match the shape of the handle here. And when you're doing this, there's no need to take your scabbard block here down to anything higher than like 60 grit. And the reason for that being it's going to be completely covered with leather, so it doesn't need to be polished and shiny. Plus, when you leave it at a lower grit, either 60 or 36, it gives something for the leather glue to grab onto, which is what we want. So now that I've got that inside all marked up, we'll just go over and start taking material off. So the next step that we got to do here is we're going to coat our scabbard piece with clear polyurethane. And the reason for that is we're going to be wetting our leather down to form fit it. And if you don't put clear poly on the wood will absorb a lot of the moisture from your leather. And then when you go to put your knife in here, it'll rust the crap out of it. So it's very important that before we do that, we completely coat this with the clear poly. So, you know, pretty straightforward. Just rub it on there nice. Get a pretty good coat. And just another reason that we left this at 60 grit is it gives something for this poly to grab and really seep into the wood and get a really good coating. So there we have it, nice and coated. I'm just going to set this out in the sun to dry, and then once it's good and dry, we'll come back and slap the leather on there. So I wanted to share a quick tip with you guys since we're working with the clear polyurethane. As you saw, I had gloves on, and it's very important that you wear gloves when you're working with polyurethane, because if you get that crap on your skin, it really don't want to come off. No matter how hard you scrub, no matter how good your soap is, it really doesn't want to come off. Same thing when you're working with 5-minute epoxy, it tends to stay on your hands really good, and if you don't clean it off right away, they turn nice and black and sooty. So what I like to use here in the workshop, and not a sponsor, but I have this amazing product called Tub Towels. These are just shop rags with some moisture, some solvent in there, and they've got a bit of an abrasive quality to them. And these absolutely 100% will take that epoxy off your hands before it dries, of course. And same thing with polyurethane, so if you ever have an accident and you get some on your skin, this is the best way to take care of it. So again, not a sponsor, just a product that I really love that I use in the workshop, and this should save any of you fellow knife makers, leather workers, or woodworkers a heck of a headache getting crap off your hands. So that's what I got for you. That's my tip for this video. And well, hopefully that scabbard's dry pretty soon here, and we'll jump right back into it. So here is our wood scabbard, all nice and dry. And the next step that we want to do is cut out a paper template for our leather wrap. Now I've already gone ahead and cut one out for this project just to save some time here. And pretty straightforward. Our scabbard piece is going to sit right in the middle there, and we've got a bit extra here that's going to come up over the top, and that's going to cover the knife handle when the knife gets put into our scabbard. That is traditional with these Yakut knives from what I've seen. And so pretty straightforward. Our leather is going to end up wrapping all the way around, and I have this little tab here in the front, and I have scribed on there where we're going to put a belt loop hole, so that little slot there will get cut in after we finish. And so now, once you have your paper template, go over and cut that out of some leather. And I have already gone ahead and done that to save some time yet again, and so that way we can just jump right into doing the more exciting stuff. And so there is our border. Now once this gets closed up and glued, I'm going to end up doing my threading in the center of this gouge here, all the way down the side. But the next step that we want to do is I want to cut in my belt slot, and we're only going to do that on one of the little ears here, because once this folds up and gets glued, if you pre-stamp both of them, they probably won't line up and things aren't going to look great. So we're just going to do one, and that just makes it easier for me to stamp through the other one once everything's glued together, rather than trying to stamp through both of them at once. So I'm going to grab my wood block here, and I'm going to grab my little belt slot tool here. And what I want to do is I'm going to go a little off center and just line things up here. Luckily, this tool has a clear outside, so I can kind of see through it to line things up. But get it to a point where I want it, and then just give it a couple good taps. And there's our belt slot. Now I have this one at about 1.5 inches long, and if you're making a sheath using a belt slot and you need it to be a little bit longer, you can always take your exact tool and just set it in your gouge that you just made and just move the top forward, and that way you can have a longer gouge with the exact same tool. Just a little tip for you. And so the next step is I'm going to go through and wet down this sheath with water so we can go ahead and do a little bit of tooling on here.
Hey!
So I've got our leather all glued up and dried, so now we're just going to clean up the edges, throw a little bit of dye on there, and then polish it up. So there's our leather all sewn up, and I have gone ahead and wet this down with some warm water to make it pliable. And we're just going to open the top up and slide our wood in there and it's going to be tight, and that's what we want. We're just going to work it nice and slow all the way down. So I made my leather nice and tight, and because it's wet and pliable, it really doesn't want to slide on there good. So a little physics trick for you guys. Learn this seating axes. Just take a rubber mallet and just whack the bottom. Just let it slide down. And there we are, nice and flush with the bottom. Goes over the handle a little bit. Knife stays in there nice and firm, doesn't fall out when you hold it upside down. That's what we're looking for. So now we're going to leave the knife in here and let this leather dry for a little bit, and then we'll do the final thing, which is just to sharpen the knife and do some testing with it. Thanks for watching till the end of the video. You know the deal. Links, like, subscribe. Keep on keeping on, and I'll see you next time.